Hi everybody, this is Steve at eSpeaks4U channel. And originally I wasn't going to talk about this because I felt it was just a big scare tactic, but it seems that they keep bringing it up, and I wanted to just inform everybody of what's really going on, and just to wake people up a little bit. Anyhow, the our President Obama had spoken previously about if we didn't raise the debt ceiling, that there was a possibility of Social Security checks, as well as veterans and disability checks, not going out, and obviously it affects a lot of people. But I wanted to reassure people that that they are going to be getting their checks, and the only way that they would not be getting their checks is if Obama himself orders the checks not to be sent. And the reason I know that this is all a lot of hype is because I was based on what a lot of investigative reporters and people have looked into. I did, based on what their sources, I decided to do a little bit of my own homework, and I did find the source that many people are referring to, and that is by I have it right here in front of me, and that is by a law professor, Michael McConnell, also a former federal appellate judge. He explains why Obama is wrong. I'm just going to read right into it. The Social Security Trust Fund holds about $2.4 trillion in U.S. Treasury bonds, which its trustees are legally entitled to redeem whenever Social Security is running a current account deficit. Thus, if we reach the debt ceiling, this is what will happen. The Social Security Trust Fund will go to the Treasury and cash in some of its securities, using the proceeds to send checks out to the recipients. Each dollar of debt that is redeemed will lower the outstanding public debt by $1. That enables the Treasury to borrow another dollar without violating the debt ceiling. The debt ceiling is not a prohibition on borrowing new money. It is a prohibition on increasing the total level of public indebtedness. If Social Security cashes in some of its bonds, the Treasury can borrow that same amount of money from someone else. President Obama is therefore wrong when he says that failure to raise the debt ceiling might result in not sending out Social Security checks. Again, that is I was quoting what Michael McConnell, which is he's also a former federal appellate judge, had said. With that being said, I also wanted to touch upon, and again, the only way that Social Security checks and other checks are not going to be sent is if Obama himself gives the order not to. So, that being put aside, I wanted to touch up on a couple of things. Number one, I wanted to mention that it is to my understanding that most of President Obama's assets or income comes from his investments in treasury bills, treasury notes, bonds, and he has a substantial amount of money invested in here, anywhere from $1 million to $5 million, according to sources. And these bills and treasury notes, the way they generate income is based on interest and also on inflation. I'm not going to get into uh, the definitions behind a U.S. Treasury bill or U.S. Treasury bond. I'm gonna. I encourage people to do their own research and notice how the fact that there's a possibility of inflation taking place, that these treasury bills or treasury bonds actually make money. So it's kind of interesting, I think, because you have a lot of the politicians, as well as, of course, our president. You know, they make their investments based on how they foresee the economy moving. And what's interesting is that, at least I find it interesting, that at the end of the day, they make the choices on how our economy is going to move. For example, take if there's a whole virus scare going on, well, they are the ones that issue the the um, the state of emergencies and so forth. And so therefore, if they start requiring you to take a vaccination, what really prevents them from previously making some type of investment in that vaccination or in the company that makes that vaccination? Just the same, like if they can anticipate, of course, before they address us and tell us about it, if they can anticipate that there's going to be a war going on or something, then they would probably invest in military manufacturers or airplane, based on how they foresee that they're taking our economy and our nation's direction. So, with that being said, I just wanted to go through last night on July 25th. Our president addressed the nation regarding the whole debt ceiling and so forth. And there's a couple of things that I just kind of wanted to point out. For example, he said, and I quote, "And keep in mind that under a balanced approach, the 98% of Americans who make under 250,000 would see no tax increase at all." Now, end quote. Now, my take on that is, okay, great, that doesn't affect me because I don't make that kind of money. But unfortunately, shit rolls downhill. So if the people who are making over 250,000, they get affected, those are probably the people that are employing you. So if their taxes go up, guess what? They don't have enough money to pay for your salaries. So there's going to be more job loss. So that's the one thing I'd like to address to a lot of the people that make under the 250, that, maybe, for example, if maybe that person that makes more than 250 is not a business owner, but yet he still makes 250,000 because he's a professional. Well, the people that do work for him, even though he's not a business owner, may be like a cleaning person, a person who does a landscaping, a pool maintenance person. those people may end up losing their jobs. Because that person may say, well, you know what? Since the government's deciding to tax me more, then I can't afford to pay the pool guy, and I'll do it myself, or the cleaning person, and I'll do it myself. So those are things that people need to be thinking about. Also, another thing he had mentioned, Obama said in his address to the nation on July 25th, I quote, "Many Republicans in the House refuse to consider this kind of balanced approach. I feel that this is more of a re-election strategy, putting the blame on the Republicans, trying to set himself a nice little comfortable couch there. That's the only thing I wanted to mention on that I feel that it's more of a re-election strategy based on the usage of words that and the pointing of the finger that he's doing. He also says raising the debt ceiling does not allow Congress to spend more money. It simply gives our country the ability to pay the bills that Congress already has racked up. I see that is that he's basically mixing apples and oranges. He's trying to mix in various things, and that's why he's throwing it that in there that part of the bills is the whole Social Security checks. Well, that's not a bill. There's already a trust fund in place for that, and people that are currently working and working legally actually still get their Social Security deduction taken from their checks. So I don't see how one thing relates with the other. Tactic for confusing people. And he goes on into saying, if that happens and we default, we would not have enough money to pay all of our bills. Bills that include monthly Social Security checks, veteran benefits, and government contracts we've signed with thousands of businesses. Well, I can see what you're saying about the government contracts, but as far as our Social Security checks goes, I mean, there's a fund for it. There's no reason that those checks, cannot be issued out. Now that he may not want to, and he gives the order for it not to happen, that's a whole different ballgame. He also mentioned that interest rates would skyrocket on credit cards, on mortgages, on car loans, which amounts to a huge tax hike on the American people. That's inflation. And who profits? Remember the Treasury bills? And finally, he mentions that we can't allow the American people to become collateral damage to Washington's political warfare. Well, how about the word economic warfare? Fearmonger, scare tactics. That's exactly what he's playing. Anyhow, those are just things that I wanted to bring up. Again, I didn't really want to get into this. Sometimes all this money talk goes over people's heads, and that's fine. That's why I encourage for people to educate themselves, and even if it's on YouTube, look around. There's people that check your sources out. Don't just take my word for it. You may want to investigate some actual scholars and professors and specialists, and that are not really geared towards a political party. Just try to be more in the middle. Look for teachers trying to educate on economics, and just remember that things don't just happen. Everything happens for a reason, and the person behind the big screen, it's only going to profit that person and the person that surrounds that individual.